So I guess this week another box set to talk about, right? We got a 50th anniversary box set of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which just came out this week, and all I got was a lousy T-shirt. But I put it on my watch list because I'll wait to see. We got Prime Days coming up, and then Black Friday because it's like $150. so, I'll wait and see if it comes down. I have never paid $150 for a CD before, and I don't plan on starting.
For a CD, the CD box, not even the vinyl.
It's one of these. It's actually a Blu-ray. It's on Blu-ray, and it's like a new Dolby Atmos mix and all that stuff. And then there's also a couple other CDs of a live performance of it, and a big old book,
That was never filmed, was it?
it was never filmed. All that they've ever been able to come up with is just some little bootleg, and this was obviously long before the days of cell phones.
Right.
But the best I could come up with is that somebody at some point several years ago was able to come up with enough fan shot footage. It's really bad. It's really dark. It's hard to see the stuff, but got enough fan shot footage and some still photos and stuff that they actually tried to reconstruct the concert with it. And this tribute band called the Musical Box has staged that show, has toured with a version of that show, which they actually had Peter Gabriel consulting with them on staging this show. But yeah, that's part of my story. We're coming up on 51 years, right? So we're about 10 months past the 50th anniversary, but still the thing's coming out now. But it was it's coming up on 51 years since I saw that stage show, which is I'll die on this hill. It's the greatest rock concert I ever went to. It was just fantastic. Because think of this. This is long before the days of Madonna and pop stars now who put on these big, opulent, choreographed stage performances. Well, this is long before that. This is the first time that I think anybody's ever done something like this in a rock show. Where Gabriel put together, some costumes and some slides and a slideshow behind him and everything like that. And Phil Collins hated it. The rest of the band didn't do it, but Gabriel went with it because it was a couple years earlier when he started getting attention and the band started getting attention because Gabriel would start showing up on stage in these bizarre costumes. Playing the characters that he was singing about in the songs, and so he did this big production for the tour that it became legendary, and because it was the first time anybody had ever done something like this, and yeah, Collins hated it. He said,
"Did the other band members dress up at all, or was
no? And I saw this show. This was. The tour started, strangely enough, in Chicago, and I saw it in St. Louis, and I think it was like 3 days before. It was like the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I remember, and I think it was the third or fourth show on the tour, and they were still working out the kinks apparently, right? But I remember going to this, and they played the album "The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway" in its entirety. And then didn't leave the stage or anything. But after they did that, then they did a couple of the classic songs from early, the Musical Box and the Knife. and nobody had ever heard it because this album had just was released like the day that they started the tour. So nobody had heard this, and that's another thing. And Phil Collins has talked about this before. He said he thought it was a stupid idea because nobody knows these songs. Nobody's ever heard these songs, and and I didn't know Genesis. I had heard Firth of Fifth, which was a KC staple for a couple years from the album Selling England by the Pound. That's the only thing I knew from Genesis. And a buddy of mine said, "Let's go see the show." I said, "Yeah, okay." I didn't know anything about them, and I was floored. I was totally intrigued. Of course, I'd never heard any of his music before, but it was just fantastic, and just a great visual presentation, and it's how I became a Genesis fan.
And that's where you got the T-shirt.
And then I went out, ran out, and bought the album, and fell in love with the album, and that's and then I backtracked and learned all Genesis back catalog, and it was just shortly after that when there were a couple months into that tour when Gabriel announced that he was leaving the band at the end of the tour, and he did, and everybody thought, that's the end of Genesis, right?
Nope.
And that was 1974. That's 1975 when Gabriel left, when the tour wrapped up at the end of '75, and yeah, but you know what? I still stuck with Genesis for a couple more albums. It was when Steve Hackett left, a couple of three later, that Genesis lost me, where they really dived into the Billboard 100 charts.
Well, it's certainly one of the biggest bands of the '80s in terms of sales.
Yeah.
And then Phil Collins himself had his solo career, which was also successful in the '80s.
Oh, they were huge. They were the biggest thing. They were the biggest thing anywhere in the '80s. Between Collins,
Mike and the Mechanics, wasn't that?
Mike and the Mechanics was that was Mike Rutherford side project. Tony Banks did one or two solo albums, which didn't get any notice.
I think Gabriel had a pretty good career too.
Gabriel went on to a pretty good career. Well, they've long said in retrospect, and Gabriel said long in retrospect, that was probably the best thing that I ever did for that band was leave.
Everybody wins.
But yeah, this is coming up on the 51st anniversary, so we're finally getting a 50th anniversary box set.
Well, you know that,
and it was like the release of the album. See, the plan was to release this album before they went on tour, but it just, they kept missing their deadlines. It got delayed, and I think it ended up getting released like the week before their first show in Chicago. Right, and so that whole thing got screwed up. So they literally went on tour, playing this music that nobody had ever heard before. And it was their first big tour of the United States. And they were trying to break through in the United States, but it worked. It worked. And apparently they had a lot of, they talk about now that there was a lot of technical problems with some of the stuff that, was like they projected a slideshow on the back of the screen where there were 3 screens, and there were still pictures that they would throughout the show. And apparently that kept screwing up, and a couple of Gabriel's costumes kept screwing up. But I didn't see any of that. Everything I saw, I was like, "Holy shit, this is fucking fantastic!" No, it was basically a Gabriel show. It was Hackett and Rutherford were just Hackett. And you see old videos of Genesis. Hackett, a lead guitar player. He always sat in a stool. He always sat down playing the stool, and Rutherford had a double neck guitar. It was like one neck was bass guitar and the other one was electric guitar. and then Collins on the side playing the drums, and then Tony Banks on the edge in the back of keyboards, and none of them were animated. They were just kind of there. You saw them, but they were there. But it was all Gabriel and the slideshow behind him, and it was fantastic. It was great because Gabriel, you know, they would have these long instrumental. This is how Gabriel came up with the whole costume bit, because in the early days, you know, they would have these long instrumental passages in a lot of their songs, and Gabriel would just be kind of standing there on stage, nothing to do. He'd bang a tambourine, but he'd be standing there. He's getting bored, right? And they could not get any attention, or they couldn't sell their albums. And so Gabriel came up with this idea. Well, let's give the audience something to look at during the passages. So he disappeared and he came walking out. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the cover of the Foxtrot album, with the picture of the fox and the long red dress.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Gabriel had found a long red dress in his wife's closet, went out and bought a fox mask, and during an instrumental passage in Dublin, this happened in Dublin, he walked off the stage and he came back out with that fox mask and that long red dress, just like that picture on the cover, and just shocked everyone. He didn't tell anybody he was going to do it. And sang the song in the musical box dressed like that. And they got big headlines in what was the big music newspaper, trade paper at the time?
Melody Maker.
Melody Maker. They got a headline on the front page of Melody Maker with a picture of Gabriel on stage in that outfit, and that broke them. That got them some attention. So Gabriel said, "Well, hell, I'm just going to keep putting this." The rest of the band hated it. They didn't like it, but it's like, well, you know, what are we going to do? It's working. So, you know, they kind of tolerated it. and then he just went crazy with the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour. And like I said, and the rest of the band, they didn't like it. They just wanted to go on stage and do their music, you know. And they thought it overshadowed their music, and it became the Peter Gabriel show and not the Genesis show. So they were kind of resentful of it. And all these guys were like 24 years old at the time, you know, and so they don't know from shit.
Yeah.
They don't know it. And they started fighting during recording of the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, because Gabriel was going through a lot of crap in his life time. And so they split up, and they were still like 24, 25 years old when all this happened. By the time they were 30, they were all major superstars.
Yeah.
And that's what kills me when I think back on this, is how young these guys were. You know, I say when they went on tour with the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, they were all 24 years old. They were all born in 1950. You know, they were all buddies from school, right? And they were all the same age. And 24 years old when they split up, and they had already had this pretty solid body of work behind them, which didn't sell much at the time. I mean, it has in retrospect. You know, all those albums have become legendary, right? But at the time, they struggled. They struggled mightily. Yeah, Gabriel had. It took a long time for them to record this album. They kept missing deadlines because Gabriel was his wife was pregnant with his first daughter, and it was a real difficult pregnancy. I think she almost died a couple times, and they were recording in the studio that was like out in rural area. You know, it was quite a ways away from London where they all lived, and so he kept disappearing for a couple days at a time to tend after his wife, and the band didn't. You know, they were getting frustrated by that. And then at the same time, William Friedkin rang up Gabriel and asked him to write a screenplay for him. Gabriel said, "Yeah, I want to do that." So he asked the band, he said, "Hey, can we put this off so I can go write this screenplay?" And they said, No, we got to do this album. We got You can't do that. So he didn't do it, and he was pissed off by that. And then he really didn't want to go on this long tour with his newborn baby and his wife going through all those health issues, and so he finally said, "Enough. I'm done. And he told them before they left on tour, he told them that this was it. He'll do the tour because he was under contract to do it. He said, "Well, I'll do the tour, but I'm done after this." And then somehow in the middle of the tour that leaked out, and the press got a hold of it because he wasn't planning on announcing it until after the tour was over. Somehow it leaked out. But yeah, that was quite a pivotal point in the history of rock music in 1974 and 1975.